Welcome to the podcast. It's the magical holidays. Time for Joe watching 60 Christmas movies in 60 days. Why, you might ask? Because it sounds like a crazy task to be watching 60 Christmas movies in 60 days. It'll be struggle, no I won't lie. By the halfway point I will lose my mind, but with your support I'm gonna be fine. So let's have a blast on this Christmas time. Join me now and let's find out about today's Christmas movie. Was it good or bad? Happy or sad? Is there another dead mom and dad? Let's get to it with no delay. It's your old pal Joe and he's happy to say welcome to Joe watches 60 Christmas movies in 60 days.
How's it going, everybody? It's me, it's your old pal Joe, and this is episode 37 of Joe Watches 60 Christmas Movies in 60 Days. I am tuckered out, but we must keep going forward. This is the third recording of the day for old Joe because it's nice out finally. It's been so frigid, and it just hasn't been fun to sit on the podcast patio and record. So this is the third recording of the day, and let's just get to it. But first, of course, we must talk about my good friends over at Third Eye Comics. Third Eye Comics, it's your home for all of your pop culture needs, whether that's comics, graphic novels, tabletop gaming, equipment, music, or movies. You can find anything you want at one of their three main stores in Annapolis, Maryland, or if you can't get to Annapolis or to any of their other DC, Maryland, Virginia locations, feel free to shop online at shop.thirdeyecomics.com. Again, that's shop.thirdeyecomics.com. Support them because they are supporting me. Thanks. And let's talk about today's movie. Today's movie is Trading Christmas, or as it's officially titled, Debbie Macomber's Trading Christmas. I think it might be Debbie Macomber. I looked up how to pronounce this writer's name. So this is based upon a novel by the author Debbie Macomber. And it's you know what? It's a fine movie. It's a fine movie. It has an actor that I really enjoy named Tom Cavanaugh, who I know him best from the 2000s drama comedy show called Ed. But he's most probably well known to modern day audiences if you watch the Flash TV show as Dr. Harrison Wells. So he's a really I think he's a very fun actor to watch. And so I got excited when he was in this movie, and I got what I wanted out of it mostly. Except the movie just has lots of characters. The movie has lots of characters, and the movie also does the thing where they cut back and forth between characters' progress in their story for no reason other than just to provide some momentum, some I don't know what else to put it. Basically, just to keep the story feeling like it's moving, even though you're not making great progress in any area. We open with our main character, one of our main characters. There's four main characters. We open with one of our main characters, Emily, going shopping for ingredients to make gingerbread houses from scratch. She lives in Seattle. Next, we see her hanging her stockings on her fireplace before stopped and considering the one that says Dad on it. That's because, as we'll learn, she lost her husband with the last few years, and she's still dealing with, it might have been within the last year, I do not know, but she's still dealing with the loss of him, and seeing his stocking kind of set her back a bit. She gets emotional and puts it back in the box. Jump to Boston, Massachusetts, across the country. We hear police sirens that tell us this is the big city. We end up in an apartment that's very nice with two of our other main characters, Charles and Ray. They talk about which fruit their grandmother sent them for the year. Charles got pineapple, Ray got grapefruit. They enjoy some pizza and beer. We find out Ray has a company that someone wants to buy, and and Charles is working on a book. He's been struggling to write it between his professorial duties and generally has writer's block. Ray suggests that Charles get out of town so he can focus on writing. They're also brothers. Charles and Ray are brothers. We then jump to San Francisco, California. Our fourth main character appears. She's Faith, and she's currently manning the phones in an office. That's all we see of her. We jump away. We then jump back to Boston to meet even more characters. This is Emily's daughter and her boyfriend. They go to university. They talk about whether they can spend time away from home for Christmas. Emily's daughter talks about how much her mom has been checking in on her since her dad died. Just then, in fact, her mom calls, and we get a bit of a phone call between the mother and the daughter. Daughter is trying to get out of having to fly clear across the country for Christmas by saying it's only for a few days. Emily is sad to hear that her daughter doesn't want to come home for Christmas, but eventually says it's okay. Emily calls her friend, Faith, and complains about her daughter not coming home for Christmas. This gives Emily an idea. We then see her put her home up on a holiday swap, not a holiday swap, but a home swap site. Like, you can stay in my home for 2 weeks, I'll stay in your home for 2 weeks, that sort of a thing. And guess who replies? But Charles, who was thinking about getting out of town to write his book. So Charles and Emily, they make a connection, and they talk about swapping homes for the year, and they give each other some advice and some general trivia about the different homes in the different areas. Anyway, it works out. Then a lot of stuff happens in short order. So we know that Emily and Charles are going to be swapping places and coasts for Christmas. But then Faith, feeling bad for her friend Emily, decides to fly up to Seattle to surprise her, since she knows her daughter won't be there for Christmas. At the same time, we see Emily trying to tell her daughter that she's leaving town, but her daughter doesn't know this. And Emily doesn't know is her daughter and her boyfriend, now that they've gotten out of having to go home for Christmas, they're actually going to fly to Phoenix, Arizona instead. So Emily's flying to Boston to be near her daughter who goes to school there. Her daughter's flying to Phoenix, and Emily's friend Faith is flying to Seattle. Do you get it? Good. We also see Charles leaving a message for his brother explaining that he's going out of town. We stop over in Phoenix, Arizona to follow Emily's daughter and her boyfriend on their journey. This will be the last time I mention them until the end of the movie. We keep checking in on the daughter and the boyfriend, and the summation of their storyline is simply that the daughter feels bad for not spending time with her mom at Christmas, but also genuinely misses her mom. And so the boyfriend surprises her by letting her fly to meet her mom for Christmas. The end. But not the end of the movie, just the end of that subplot. We get a scene where Emily finds out her daughter isn't in Boston, so she doesn't know what she's going to do with herself for Christmas. We also get a bit with Charles, who's flown to Seattle to stay in Emily's house. When he's finally moved in, there's a knock at the door, and it's two little kids who ask me if he wants to make a snowman. He says no, but he says it very brusquely, like he's just not interested in playing with kids. And then there's a neighbor who wants to drop off cookies, and there's another neighbor who wants to drop off cookies, and there's another neighbor who says, like, Emily told me I should check in on you, and if you let me know if you need anything, okay? So he's getting way too much neighborly cheer as person after person knocks on his door. We then catch up a bit of Emily's discussion with her daughter. They clear things up, and even though Emily isn't happy to find out her daughter isn't in Boston, she lets that go and tells her daughter to have fun in Phoenix. We also see that she has accidentally triggered an alarm in Charles's apartment. The alarm company comes. Actually, they call Charles's brother Ray, and then Ray goes over and says, like, okay, I'm his brother. I can check it out. He apparently was the emergency contact, and when they get into the apartment, they find Emily just lounging in a robe, just watching TV or something. So she's embarrassed, and they're embarrassed for bothering her. What's notable here is that Ray and Emily hit it off immediately. Then we see Faith arriving at Emily's place and letting herself in, surprising Charles. There's a whole thing to it, but it works itself out. Back to Ray and it's not worked itself out, but we'll get back to it. Then we see Faith arriving at Emily. Then we come back to Ray and Emily. He helps her figure out how to turn on the TV, and they continue to hit it off. Eventually, he asks to take her out for dinner. He says he can write out some spots for her to visit while she's in town. Emily agrees. Back to Charles and Faith. See, part of the problem here is that Faith is planning on staying with Emily, so she doesn't have a place to stay. She asks if she can at least stay the night and then maybe catch a bus back to fly home the next day. He's not into the idea. She says, "What, are you afraid of me?" He promises he is not afraid of her. They do a lot of banter, and it's fine. Eventually, he agrees. The next day, Emily finds out what Faith tried to do. So, wait, Emily, neither one of you reached out to the other for a whole day? to let them know what's going on. You left town. And when I say you, I could be talking to either one of them without telling your best friend your plans. Faith, I get it, was surprising Emily. But Emily wasn't trying to surprise Faith. She could have just said, you know what, I'm going to go to Boston. I'm going to surprise my daughter. That'll be really fun and nice. And then once everything went haywire on either one of their ends, you think that they would then contact the other person and be like, you won't believe what's happened here. And yet they waited until the next day. Anyway, Charles offers to give Faith a ride to the bus station, but when they get there, they find out there's only one bus a week back to Seattle, because she's in the suburbs of Seattle. That's where she lives. She asks him if he could drive her to Seattle. He says, no way, that's way too far. It's like 3 hours round trip. We jump ahead to the night as Emily gets ready for her night out with Ray. We also see Faith reading through some of the stuff that Charles has written, because he's really trying hard to write. And she finds that he's left out some of the pages that he's written, so she reads it. And then she takes some snacks, which he really appreciates, and so he starts to soften toward her. Quick note from 40 minutes in, I write, this movie is fine and fun enough, but it is a fucking bear to write notes about, and that is the truth. This just keeps jumping back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. Anyway, Ray and Emily go out on their date, ? And it goes really well. They have a good time. They talk about her husband that passed away. We learn that Christmas wasn't a big deal for Charles and Ray and their family, mostly because they moved around a lot and it became hard to make a big deal about Christmas. They often didn't even usually have a Christmas tree. The two of them have a really nice time. Back to Charles and Faith. She ended up making a whole dinner for him that he could eat as needed. She's also complimented him on his aftershave, saying that he smells really nice. Now we join Emily and Ray after dinner. They talk about the things they want in life. There's a lot of talk about travel. Back to Charles and Faith. Faith has finished reading the first few chapters of Charles's book and offers him some advice on how he's writing the main female character of the book. I think she's the villain in his novel. Saying it reinforces a lot of old-fashioned views on women, and now she's over-the-top evil. This leads to them having an argument. Eventually he storms off with his finished chapters, but we see he's thinking over the advice that he was just given. Now over to Ray and Emily finishing their night. They politely say goodnight, and that's that, but then he asks if she's busy the next night. She smiles. We join her catching up with Faith, and they update each other on their respective brothers. Faith tells Emily to be careful. She's only known this guy for a little while, and she has to go home soon. The next morning, Faith finds some newly written pages slipped under her bedroom door with a post-it note on them asking, "Is this better?" She happily dives into the written material. We also watch a montage of Emily and Ray on their date. It's a big tour around the Boston area. They have a nice time. Back to Charles. Faith slips the pages back under his door with a note of much better. We then jump ahead to the next day. We get more bickering between Faith and Charles, but they're definitely warming up to each other. As Faith reviews new pages, she decides to look into the other books that he's written. This really won't come up much, except later on she admits to him that she bought some of his books and read them and thinks that one of them is really good. Now we're with Emily and Ray. They go buy a Christmas tree for her to have in Charles's apartment, and then we're back with Charles and Faith. Charles is blocked and can't think of what to write next. Faith suggests that he go out and do something else and just let the work come to him. But then a Christmas tree is delivered. It seems Emily forgot to cancel her delivery for a Christmas tree. Charles and Faith bicker about whether to keep it or not. Back to Ray and Emily. They decorate her new tree. Ray talks about how he can't remember the last time he decorated a tree. He talks about how this year with Emily, for the first time in a long time, it feels like Christmas. And they kiss! Back to Charles being blocked, having writer's block, I should put it that way. He sees Faith outside playing with some neighborhood kids. He decides to join them. They all have a great time, and he suddenly gets an idea for his writing. Back to work. Back with Emily and Ray. She asks why he's not married. He talks about the grind of his business and always having to travel. We never really find out what Ray does for a living other than he owns a company, and he's very busy almost all the time. This leads to them kissing some more, but then she backs off, saying that she's going to be leaving in a few days, and maybe they shouldn't get too serious. She also feels weird since this is the first time she's done any of this since her husband passed away. Ray is very understanding. Eventually they call it a night, but make plans for the next day. Cut to Faith having dinner at a restaurant in Seattle, or wherever she's at. This leads to Charles walks in, and they end up having dinner together. And the reason is because it was a recommended restaurant from somebody. So I'm sure they both got it recommended to them. That's why they ended up at the same restaurant. As they have their dinner, they talk about Ray and and what's her name, Emily, and there's suspicions that may be something going on between them. As they walk home, he tells her how helpful she's been in helping his book. He also admits it's been 2 years since his girlfriend broke up with him. That's why Christmas is always so hard for him, because she broke up with him just before Christmas 2 years ago. The next day, he has finished his book. Faith races to read the final chapters. We jump over to Ray and Emily. He announces that he's selling his company. They celebrate with kisses. It was supposed to be like a big decision that he's come to, that he actually is going to sell his company. Anyway, yeah, they celebrate with kisses. Back to Faith and Charles. Charles decides to bring the tree inside and decorate it. Back to Emily and Ray. They're smooching on the couch. But guess what? Her daughter shows up, because she was going to surprise her mom with coming back to Boston early. She catches him mid-smooch, and she is sort of weirded out. We cut to Ray leaving for the night to let Emily spend time with her daughter. Emily really doesn't want him to leave, but he insists it's okay. She should spend time with her daughter. He also gives her a present that he got for her, which is some really pretty earrings. She feels bad she didn't get him anything. He says, "No, you gave me something. The best Christmas I've had in years." And with that, Ray leaves. Back to Charles and Faith. They accidentally get really close to one another, and it's enough to make them kiss. Then they go all out smooching each other. The next morning, Charles is very excitedly making breakfast for Faith and himself. Faith comes down and says, "I think you must have forgot that I have to catch that bus now." And he and Faith are very sad. We spend more time with Emily and her daughter. She finally talks about moving on from her husband. Back to Charles and Faith. He takes her to the bus station and he sends her off, and it's all they can do to not cry. He promises to send her a copy of his book. At one point she said, "You need to send me a copy of your book, and it needs to be personalized, none of that generic stuff." And it was very funny. I laughed. She gets on the bus and it starts to leave, but then he rushes on board and says, "I don't want you to leave." And she says, "But I didn't want to leave. I thought you needed me to leave." And he goes, No, I didn't." And they start kissing, and they head back to Emily's. Back to Emily and her daughter. Her daughter wants Emily to spend time with Ray, so she comes up with an idea. Cut to her daughter, and her daughter's boyfriend arriving at Ray's to celebrate Christmas with Chinese food, because that's what Ray mentioned he normally had at Christmas time. Then we jump ahead 1 year later. We see Faith and Charles arriving at Emily's. Faith is pregnant, and Ray now lives with Emily. Wow, the end. I feel like I did a terrible job with that podcast, but we made it through it together, and that's all I can say. I'm sorry about this. These are wearing on me. MVP of the movie has to be my boy Chuck Charles, because that's the character that was played by Tom Cavanaugh. I just really enjoy him, so it makes sense that I'm going to choose him. But everybody was fine in this. This is another one of those movies that's totally fine. You'll have a nice time watching. It's a romantic comedy. Well, just a romantic movie, really. It's a rom-rom. And you'll have a nice time. If you know what you want going in, you're going to get it from this movie. So I don't have any complaints about it. It was just hard as shit to take notes about. Otherwise, a totally fine way to spend some time. If you have any comments, questions, or concerns, you can always reach me at JOEMOC on social media everywhere. In the meantime, in between time, have a good day, and I will talk to you tomorrow.